Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. So welcome to today's meeting of the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. My name is Isaac Wilson. I'm a councillor and the new chair for this board. This meeting is being webcast, and the link to view that recording is on the meeting webpage. And for everybody speaking, please, usual rules, turn on your mic when you need to speak and off again, and direct any questions towards me. For the benefit of any members of the public watching on the webcast, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, starting on my left. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm looking forward to working with you. Councillor Pauline Graham, Crossgates and Winmore Ward.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, Chair. Congratulations. Welcome. I'm Councillor Sharon Hamilton, representing Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the board. Craig Timmins, Councillor for Carverley and Farsley.
Hello, everyone, and welcome from me too. Councillor Lisa Martin from Roundhay Ward.
Adding to the welcomes, Chair. Morning, everyone. Councillor Tom Hinchcliffe, Bramley and Stanley Ward.
I'm going to say hello, Isaac, and welcome as well. My name's Andy Parnham, and I'm a councillor for Armley Ward.
Morning all. Keely Parker, Head of Product Management, Integrated Digital Service.
Morning everyone. Jason, Head of 100% Digital Leeds, representing the Integrated Digital Service, along with Keely. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Andy Dodman. I'm the Assistant Chief Executive with responsibility for the HR, People Agenda, Business Support and Digital.
Good morning, everybody. I'm John Ibo. I'm one of the Head of HR with responsibility for Workforce, Equality, Diversity and Inclusion.
Hi, everyone. Lewis Sincala, Head of Procurement.
Good morning. Ben Finley, Deputy Director for Children's Services Interim.
Good morning, Phil Evans, Deputy Director, Resources and Transformation in the Children's and Families Directorate.
Morning everyone, I'm Victoria Bradshaw. I'm the Assistant Chief Exec for Finance, Trade and Resources and the Section 151 Officer for the Council. Thank you.
Morning everybody, Mariana Pexton, Deputy Chief Executive.
Morning everybody, Councillor Deborah Cooper, Executive Board Member for Resources and Deputy Leader.
Good morning, Councillor Helen Hayden, Executive Member for Children and Families.
Good morning, Councillor David Blackburn, Farnley and Wortley Ward, and as the first one of the opposition, I would like to welcome the new chair.
Good morning, welcome Isaac to our board. Councillor Conrad Hartbrook, Rothwell Ward.
Good morning, Ryan Stevenson from the Harewood Ward. This is the first meeting I've got to, so I can't really welcome you, so we can welcome one another.
Good morning, Billy Flynn, Councillor for Adlam Wharfdale Ward. Welcome, Isaac.
Morning, everyone. I'm Rob Clayton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you. Welcome, Councillor Stevenson, and to all our guests, and thank you, everybody, for your warm welcomes. That was lovely. Nice start to the week. So, could I just start by asking Rob, as Scrutiny Officer, to go through items 1 to 5, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, the standard items that we take at each meeting. Item 1 is appeals, and there are no appeals against refusal of inspection of documents today, Chair. Item 2 is exclusions of the press and public, and there are no items that fit that criteria today, Chair. Item 3 is late items, and there are no late items on today's agenda, Chair. Item 4 is declarations of interest for elected members under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct, and I will just briefly pause to allow any members to declare any. I shall take silence as none. And item 5, Chair, is apologies, and we have no apologies at today's meeting. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And I am actually going to pass back to you for item number 6. If you could go through the matters arising from the minutes, please.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Wilson. Yes, just very, very briefly, subject to, there's been a slight alteration to the work programme in relation to minute 41, which was the staff survey item, which we did discuss in the pre-meeting. And just to highlight that is going to be dealt with in a slightly different way to it was previously reported, in that we'll be considering a working group early in 2026 and then follow that up with a meeting with a public item in February to consider that. Minute 42, Chair, on financial health, just to emphasise that colleagues from Children and Families have kindly attended today's meeting to support the board's recommendation from July, which was to focus on overspending directorates. And then minute 43, I've already covered, Chair, really, which is the working groups that are planned now in January, and I will update the work programme accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. And just before we start to say, we have also discussed in a pre-meeting swapping 2 of the items around today. So we're swapping items 8 and 9 in order. So we'll be having procurement first on the agenda. Hopefully that's not news to the officers involved. Lovely. Okay, so moving on to item number 7, which is financial health monitoring. And I think we're starting with a presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Rob's just going to share the slides. The 3 of us are going to do a triple axe, and we'll be going through the current financial position, where we are specifically in children's and families, and then looking at the findings and the projections from the Newton work that was undertaken. So if we just go to the next slide, Rob, please. Shows an overspend of 39.5 million, which is an increase from the previous month of 10.2 million. We were expecting an increase in this monitoring due to the work that's been undertaken by Newton, which Ben will go into more detail on, within the Children's and Families Directorate, and that was around having a robust position of where we thought we could forecast for the end of the financial year based on the number of children in external placements. We've also seen an increase in adults and health from the position that we reported last time. This is mainly around the demand budgets, and the next few pay runs will be key to see the number of people that are requiring support, mainly around the older age residential care placements, and we are seeing an increase. Now, that's not necessarily the number of people coming into that provision, but the number of people leaving is not as we'd forecast, which is really good news, but there is a financial cost around that. We've also reported an underspend in strategic, and this is mainly around additional Section 278 payments that the council receives, and these are under the Highways Act, and that's increased to where we were forecasting, so we've brought that into the position so that the overspend is reduced to 39.5 million. We will be reviewing all those in the next financial monitoring report about what other resources we will bring in to manage this overspend position. If we just go to the next slide, please. So within the budget for 25-26, we do have assumed savings of 107.5 million, with the majority of those on track, either being delivered or will be delivered in this financial year. We do have around about 26% of those savings, so 27.8 million, which will not be achieved in this year, but will be achieved in over the next financial year. However, there are 1 or 2 in adults and health around income where we won't be making the saving, where we've discussed previously, and Caroline went into detail at the last meeting around the income projections and why we've hit a ceiling on those. And as I've said, over this monitor and the next monitor will be key around those demand pressures coming through. So in recognition that, if you go on to the next slide, please. So in recognition of the financial position, Executive Board has approved that we strengthen the spending controls that we've got in place. So now all new grants that are received by the council will be considered by the Financial Challenge Group to ascertain whether any of that funding can be used to support the general fund in line with the grant conditions. We'll be reviewing grants paid to external bodies, to make sure those are around critical spend in delivery of services. And then the key one is that any expenditure over £500, which is completed via purchase cards or purchase orders. There is a list of exemptions through those which have been agreed by the corporate leadership team, but everything else will come through a spending panel that's meeting 3 times a week to get those approvals, so that we still keep it efficient, but we make sure that spend for the remaining part of the year is only on the critical delivery of services. Through the Best Council Financial Challenge Group, we will also be reviewing agency and overtime for the remaining of the year, again in line with the vacancy freeze that we've had in place, where it should only be those frontline critical services where we need to have that level of staffing, but also around income generation posts to make sure that we don't jeopardise bringing income into the council. And then the procurement team set up a panel around reviewing all new contracts, extensions and exemptions, and reviewing those and just challenging some of the assumptions in those and requirements to make sure that we're achieving value for money. So all that is being supported by having communications through the whole council, so everybody knows what's happening and when we'll be starting that from, which is the 1st of December, so next Monday. And we will be including that in managers' comms as well. So if I then hand over to Phil. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. And just a couple of slides from me that hopefully set some context for the Directorate's budget position at period 6, and then I'll hand over to Ben, who will actually focus. Oh, sorry, I've just come off holiday with a terrible cold, so apologies for that. So a couple of slides from me just to try to set some context, and then I'll hand over to Ben, who will probably work through in some further detail some of the work in relation to children looked after, but also some of the work that we've undertaken with a consultancy company called Newton. So as Victoria has set out, the period 6 position is an overspend of 28.77 million, which does represent a significant increase from the period 5 position. But that also reflects that we've done an incredible amount of work to try to provide an absolute certainty of position in terms of reassurance, because we recognise there is a challenge not only of the overspend but also about us being able to forecast that overspend. So for the Directorate as a whole, there are 2 areas realistically that the overspend sets out. One is in relation to children looked after, and there are a number of different headings in relation to that. So they're detailed in the slides, and as Ben will probably go through with these in a bit more detail, but external placements, as members will know, that's a really, really expensive set of arrangements operating in a market that is generally regarded as being broken, with significant profit being made by providers. And that is the biggest area of overspend. We have got a target to reduce the number of children in our external residential, and we've been doing quite a lot of work to build up our own capacity in our own internal residential to try to help on that. The second area of children looked after budget pressure is in relation to supported accommodation and leaving care. Those are effectively lower levels of packages of support to recognise the journey of the young person into an independent living. But because we've got more children than we would want in external residential, there is a knock-on effect as how that then moves on. And then we've got an overspend in relation to independent foster agencies. The board will probably be aware that fostering is quite often the most beneficial outcome that we seek to achieve for young people. We try wherever possible to make sure that's it with our in-house fostering team, but there is also then an external market for foster carers who are remunerated by independent fostering agencies, who recoup a significant amount of money from the local authority in terms of that. So again, it's at a price premium. So those are the three main areas in relation to children looked after, and that forms the biggest cost pressure. But there are other pressures in relation to the directorate. Learning educational psychologists, I think you will all know the pressures in relation to SEND, the pressures in relation to EHCPs. Ed psychs are really crucial in relation to absolutely being able to manage that demand as best as we're able to. And so we've invested additional money in relation to external psychologists, which allows us to do more EHCP processing than we have done previously, but that is coming at an expense and is an additional overspend. Children's centres, the £1 million in relation to children's centres reflects the fact that we weren't able to bring the proposals as quickly as we thought we might have been able to do in relation to children's centres proposals that went to executive board quite recently. There was a £2.5 million savings target applied to children's centres, and we believe that we will probably be around about £1 million short on that, which is why that figure is there. Just to reassure members, we're doing everything that we can do to try to bring that back down wherever possible, and that's a big piece of work that we're doing. The directorate staffing costs are another significant area of overspend of about 1.45 million. Demand-led services, unfortunately, require us to have a whole series of staff in relation to actually be able to manage those demand pressures. That's across the directorate as a whole, but there are some pinch points in there. So whilst we're seeing an increase in our agency costs and our overtime costs, we're also seeing increases in relation to the cost of services where we provide early years services, where you have to have a ratio of staff to children to maintain that provision. And then the final area of overspend is the child health and disability service. That's a service that absolutely deals with some of the most disadvantaged children in the city, and it is absolutely demand led. We are looking in terms of what additional arrangements we can put in place to try to help that overspend come down. But the reality is, as you will all know from your ward member duties, the increasing level of complexity of demand is filtering through into the system, and so that's giving rise to an increased cost in that area. Could I have the next slide, please, Rob? Effectively, what this slide seeks to do is just provide some context for those numbers, because it's really important that we don't just focus on the numbers and we do understand the context that sits behind them. First thing to say is the demand budget for the directorate is £138 million across children looked after and transport. And so whilst the number is a significant number in terms of overspend, the scale and quantum of the budget is important for that context. They are demand-led budgets. They are budgets where actually people will come to us with a particular need, and we have to judge that need and then view how we deliver on that need, quite often against a set of statutory requirements and statutory outcomes that we have to deliver. So there are challenges in terms of what we can do, what we can't do in terms of being able to manage that demand. We are seeking to continue to focus on reducing demand by continuing our investment in preventative services and actually taking action upstream to try to prevent the more costly interventions that flow later down in the process. And we are also absolutely got a resolute focus on cost mitigation, particularly in relation to our external residential, where we've really strengthened our commissioning approach and our contracting approach to that. I think the final thing to say realistically is we are not alone in these pressures within Leeds. That's a national challenge. You will all know that the areas of significant challenge that many local authorities are facing at the moment are SEND, children looked after and transport, and we are not therefore unique in that respect, and we are seeing that everywhere. We're still seeing the impact of relatively high birth rates and how that is flowing through the system. We're also still seeing challenges from COVID and the developmental impact that COVID had on children and how that is playing into the system. And absolutely, we are seeing children with very complex needs. And if we just look at the external residential picture, for example, We've very recently had one child that was £25,000 a week, and that is absolutely related to the complexity of the needs of that young person. Ben might be able to provide some more detail as to what we've done in terms of managing that particular case and decreasing costs, but it just gives an indication of the fact that when you've got really, really complex needs, the support that's needed to deliver against those needs is really, really costly. And if you do £25,000 by 52 weeks of the year, you can quite see how these numbers start to increase significantly. I've mentioned the broken external residential market. I think that is recognised by most people, so I won't actually say anything more on that, but it does flow through into the costs that we incur as a local authority. So that's the challenge that we have. I'll pause there and hand over to Ben.
Thanks, Phil. So the next slide just gives some context in terms of current demand and how we benchmark. And this is comparing the rate per 10,000 of children looked after by each local authority. And these are the core city local authorities you'll see there. You'll see that we're on the third line there at the end of 2024, having a rate of 89 children per 10,000 in our city looked after by us. Our current figure's 85.85 this morning. It does fluctuate day to day, week to week, but we've been sitting at around 1,500 in total looked after children for most of this year. And that's a reduction from around 1,550, 1,560 throughout most of last year. So overall, we are starting to look after less young people. We have a programme of work that's in development at the moment to deliver our Families First programme, part of national government agenda. That will strengthen our preventative work and support us in reducing the number of children we look after. Probably important too to say that in Leeds, more children looked after live in family settings than in most other core cities. So we do a good job at supporting young people to grow up in families, to have as typical a life as possible. And we have less children in private residential provision than most other core cities do. Come to the next slide, please. So this data here, this slide here, just gives a sense of placement numbers and where children are placed. And in particular, the key lines, this is looking particularly at residential care, and the lines in blue and orange are the key lines here. The orange line is our external residential numbers, external placement, I should say, to the local authority, and the blue gives us some sense of where young people are placed within our provision. I think the key issue is that the demand in both is relatively flat over a period of time, but has a dip in the centre, which means that we're setting off more recently from a lower position. The next slide, please. Thank you. This slide here is just talking about where we spend our money and where our placement costs sit. As Phil mentioned just towards the end of his section of the presentation, some residential placements can be really very expensive indeed, and on occasion we do have to accept an offer from a provider that's at the very high end of what we are comfortable, perhaps even a little bit past that, paying. What's really important to note is that as we work with that provider, we normally in those circumstances have a period of very frequent reviews with our commissioning team and social work teams working with the provider to understand actually what the needs of the child are. And we've generally been able to get those placement costs down to a more sensible figure over the first 6, 8, 12 weeks of a child's placement with a provider. Part of what we're also doing, and colleagues, you'll be aware, members, of some of the work we've done in expanding our internal provision, is we've increased our capacity to offer care directly to those children, and we've substantially increased that over the last 18 months. So we currently have 16 new beds available to us for small group living and 9 new complex needs beds, with a further 8 coming on stream over the next 3.5 months as we finish the refurbishment of 4 properties that we've identified to be the end of phase 2 of our small group living homes. That will mean that in the period that in the last 2 years we've added 37 new children's home beds, which is a substantial proportion of our overall demand, and is really starting to give us the operational flexibility to cope with very immediate demand for children's care, and is reducing our reliance on going into the private market immediately at a position of weakness to provide that care. This slide here is giving a sense of the growth of external placement costs and the substantial increase in the growth of external residential placement costs. It's a nationally acknowledged challenge. You'll be familiar with the McAllister Review and the Competition and Markets Authority review of it, both of which identified quite substantial profit margins within what we're spending when it comes to providing care. And although there is some really good quality care provision in the private sector, we also are challenged by providers whose pricing doesn't reflect actually the cost that they're incurring in providing care to our children, or necessarily a commitment to look after young people in the longer term, which is why it makes sense that we do more of this ourselves and we have more control over what we provide ourselves. Could I have the next slide, please? Just a little bit more data on what I was expecting. So we've been doing some work with Newton, a consultancy company, looking at the processes we have operating to manage the journey of a child going into private care and into our own care, and working out where we are doing it right and where we can improve those processes. All our thinking in this area starts with some fundamental assumptions that we want to maintain stability for children in care, that we want to reduce the number of children we're caring for by supporting their families to care for them, to increase reunification of children to their own family care, and if we can't do that, to increase the number of children who live in families, foster families, or in our own residential care. So we've got a key set of assumptions in our work that we're working through to deliver these objectives. We currently have 149 external residential placements. That's gone down by about 10 in the last 3 months. And we are, through the work with Newton, able to project our demands over the next period and anticipate that we will be able to reduce demand further to around 130 by the end of the current financial year. Newton came to that conclusion by reviewing the processes that we go through to consider external residential placements and by looking at the work that was already in place, which in essence they said was sufficient to address the issue, but required more pace and more capacity to deliver it at the speed that's needed. Just to note, some of the key challenges in this are our relationships with our partners who will support our services to children, and we have good arrangements in place with our external partners, particularly with the ICB and with our NHS partners, to support direct delivery of care to young people. Just following on to the final slide, please, because I'm conscious of time. We have, as I said, indicated a target of around 130 for the end of the year. We are on track to meet that. We have some work to do in terms of reviewing our partnership programme with police, learning and health partners. And we will be contributing to the overall cross-council prevention work that's going on. So just the final slide, please. Which just gives you a graph which suggests some of the projections from our colleagues at Newton. The top line in orange or yellow is a worst case scenario in yellow, and then the grey line at the bottom is a best case scenario. You'll see along the x-axis the months, and you'll be able there to plot where we should be if we're going to be on target. I'm really pleased to say that we're on target for November for delivering the grey line, which is the best performing line. December will be a challenging month because we lose a week or two due to Christmas and other things, and so we have less time in December to make progress. But at the moment, we're on target to address the bottom line, which is the steepest rate of reduction in external residential care, and speaks to the first bullet point on the second section there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Just conscious of time, so we'll move on to questions, but just before we do that, Councillor Cooper, do you have any summary you'd like to add there?
Thank you, Chair. And just very briefly, actually, I know that Scrutiny Board members are very used to getting the financial health monitoring at Scrutiny Board, but to have the full detail from children and families today, I just want to say thank you to the Executive Board member who's with us today, and children's families officers for bringing that level of detail to scrutiny members, because they've been asking for some time to see that detail. I do know that all of that information goes through Children and Families Scrutiny Board as well, so it's nice to know that that other elected members will also be looking at the detail of that. And I also know that a lot of that detail goes to Corporate Parenting Board, of which, as elected members, we're all corporate parents. So hopefully you're seeing the detail in there as well. And as for the detail that Victoria went through initially in terms of resetting the position for the financial circumstances that we're in for the rest of the year and the full forecast. Again, I just want to thank the finance team, Victoria and the finance team, for the amount of work that they're doing at the moment. We're still awaiting the outcome of the budget on Wednesday. I know officers are working on the detail of the policy statement that we've already had, and I'm sure we'll bring further detail to scrutiny on all of that when we've got the information ourselves. But for that, I'm looking forward to questions from Scrutiny Board members.
Okay, thank you. Well, on that note, could members indicate if they have a question, please? I've got Councillor Timmins already. Yeah. All right. So I've got Councillor Timmins, Parnham, Stevenson to start with. So, Councillor Timmins.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo Councillor Cooper, thank you for the Children's and Families Directorate for coming along and for the work that you do, and the passion and tenacity that you give to that. It's very much appreciated. So I'm going to go on two things that are related. So you talked about the increase in capacity of internal placements over the last couple of years. But are you able to give us an indication of how that will increase over the current financial year and maybe the next financial year as well, please? And next up, so the report highlights that even though we bring in a consistent number of children back into internal placements from the external, the numbers are still remaining high, not because more children are coming into care, but because of breakdowns in placements, and it particularly mentioned short and medium term fostering, which must be incredibly difficult for everyone involved. But the review from Newton mentions that some of this could have been prevented with earlier intervention. So I'd just like to know what lessons we've learned from that and how we can address that moving forward, which will hopefully help bring them numbers down as well.
Thank you. So we've managed over the last 2 years to grow the number of internal homes by 30 beds by 37, as I said in my presentation, and we have plans by the end of this current financial year to increase that by a further 8, which will mean that over 2 years we've added 45 beds of new capacity in registered children's homes. It's important to just emphasise the scale of that is greater than a number of local authorities combined in Yorkshire and Humber will be providing in total. So it's a substantial rate of growth, and that complements our 28 beds that we had in 4-bed homes and our 4 beds of care we had for complex needs in existence already. We've also added in as well 44 beds of capacity for young adults at the Kirkstall Flats development, which is going very well and very positive sort of initial signs from how that's developing. So we've grown, as I said, our capacity and have plans to grow it further. We are currently undertaking a review of our sufficiency strategy for the next financial year, and we were doing that with colleagues from finance and colleagues from other parts of the council, and that will give an indication of whether we think there is a rationale in growing our capacity further. We're keen to make sure that we don't over-provide, because we will then find that ways of filling those beds, and I'm keen that we don't do that. And there is a role, I think, for the private sector to provide some of the stretch capacity that we might need at various periods of time to cope with extra demand, so that we have some in place. But I think our underlying direction of travel is to grow our own estate and to provide services directly ourselves. We see good outcomes for children. We see good journeys for young people from often quite disrupted placements outside of Leeds into a more settled and stable scenario in Leeds. So it's working well. Newton identified through case reviews some areas where they felt there were opportunities for changes in practice. And it's probably fair to say that that was done with our social workers working with them, reviewing those cases. So it's not Newton saying that, it's our social workers saying that in a review of those cases. Those cases came from a particular point in time, a lot from the previous financial year, because they looked at, I think, the last 50 or 60 cases where young people had come into care, and a number of those had come into care some time ago. Since those children came into care, we've stood up our placement support team, which is working really effectively at supporting young people across a range of placements. And we're in the process of standing up some psychological support from the ICB, which will come online, we think, in February fully. And will provide a further tier of support there. So there is additional capacity coming in the placement support space. We have the placement support team providing practical support to carers, whether it's foster care or residential care. We'll have our psychologically led services coming in, and they both complement our therapeutic offer to children looked after, which we deliver directly in-house, and also complement the work the reunification team's doing. So we since the Newton analysis was undertaken and the cases that were relevant there, we've stood up some significant extra capacity in terms of placement support. So I hope if they were to come again in April, May next year, their report would reflect an improving picture and a changing picture in terms of how we're supporting more placements.
Thank you. No follow-up? No? Okay. Councillor Hayden, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, because it's just incredible the amount of work that's done. So Ben's given a really clear picture, but also as well as residential, and I know your question wasn't related to this, but in terms of placement breakdown and things like that, we are growing. We'd like more, but we are growing our foster carers and looking to grow the amount of kinship carers, because outcomes for children are best in a family setting, hopefully with their own family, the extended family, and then foster carers if that's not possible. So another thing that Ben and his team are doing is having a new type of foster carer it's called Reconnections, and they will be focusing on the very, very complex needs teenagers that are often the ones that we have to place in external. So that team will come on in January, February. That team of highly skilled foster carers, some of whom are our current foster carers that will be trained, that will undertake further training. So I was talking to one on Thursday, and she's very much looking forward, really excited about it. And some who are new to fostering but come from professional backgrounds, are mainly involved in children. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parnham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Timmins asked the question about therapeutic services, which is what I was going to ask. So that's kind of cut that off. Yeah, and placement support. So I'm pleased that that's going to be in place, because that's obviously an issue with the breakdown. So I'll keep it brief. Very good news about the extra additional in-house beds, 37 we're up to, which is great. So just a couple of questions. Kirkstall Brewery, which is in the corner of my ward and Councillor Hinchcliffe's ward, fantastic. Do we have sufficient wraparound services? Is there enough finance, I suppose? That's the question for that. And the other question I was going to ask when I read the report initially, the variance in the figures between month 5 and 6 is quite a big. I don't know if I've missed it in the report, but could somebody just explain where that variance increase comes from as well, please?
Thank you. And can I just add to that as well? I mean, I think that is partly covered in the report. So, members will have read the report, but I think that is a key interest for lots of people on the committee, and making sure that we've learned from that variance for future forecasting as well. So if you could say something on that. Thank you.
Shall I perhaps coming on just on the therapeutic offer, and then our colleagues will come in on the the variance in the figures. The therapeutic offer we have extends to all our young people looked after and our care leavers. So we have a consistent offer, fairly unusually for a local authority, across every child and care leaver who we have a responsibility for. So the offer to care leavers at Kirkstall is the same as the offer to children looked after as it relates to them. Obviously, it looks slightly different, feels slightly different, but it's the same for them. So they have support through the therapeutic social work teams. They have support to eye psychology and specialist services, and they would have support from the placement support team as well if it was needed, and will from the new psychology capacity we're standing up. So when we think about the needs of our young people, we think about them as a group, a single group, and then sort of differentiate how it's delivered, but they all receive the same core offer.
Okay, just on the financial position and the reason for the overspend, if on the appendix to the financial health report, cover report at paragraph 1.3, it does set out in detail the reason. The main area is around CLA external placements, which the overspend is 12.92 million based on where we were in August. However, sorry. Okay. The main reason is that we did know there was a pressure that we've been saying to Executive Board and to this meeting, but we were waiting for the outcome of the Newton work to be completed so that we could give a robust position of where we were forecasting to the end of the financial year. And that's where which Ben went through in some detail around we need to hit the 130 children in external residential, which is what we're working towards. So that's the reason for the overspend. Thank you.
Any follow-up on that, Councillor Putnam?
Not on the variance, but I would like to come down to Kirkstall if it's possible to arrange a visit.
Absolutely, it would be. And just to be clear, the answer I gave you previously was about the wraparound support that's at Kirkstall. So it's that same sort of package of therapeutic support, and you'd be very welcome. And if you want to drop me a line, I'll arrange for you and colleagues to visit. You'd be very welcome there.
Thank you.
I'm arranging to go down. So do you want to come with me? Yeah, good.
And just on that note, actually, I had a question about fostering generally. I'll bring Councillor Stevenson in a sec, but I wonder if we could, as a committee, get a bit more detail about how you're growing the number of foster carers and the fostering programme, because I think that's probably pretty key, and what knowledge we've got about, why people don't foster, or what would perhaps bring more people into the fostering network. So just as a note, really, I would really appreciate a bit of a summary of that topic. Councillor Stevenson.
Thanks, Chair. We've gone into quite a lot of detail of this at Children and Families, so I just want to stick to the budgetary side of this. A couple of points that was made on the consultancy contract with Newton. Was there a cost of that contract?
Yeah, Chair. The cost of the Newton contract is £200,000.
And was that one flat fee, or was it a percentage of savings over time?
So whilst Newton do have a particular model which is based upon cost recovery, in terms of this piece of work being a diagnostic, that was a flat fee.
The reason I ask it, there was a slide earlier that suggested in the worst case scenario, nothing would change. And you can understand why I'm sure there's a rebuttal, but I would be quite alarmed if we spent £200,000 and end up in a nothing change scenario. So it's a contract question. Would sort of give a bit more background to it.
Thank you. I've got Victoria indicating to come in on that.
Yeah, so when we put the procurement together, there was a clear list of requirements and deliverables that needed to be undertaken. And one of those was to have a clear improvement plan that we needed to achieve by the 31st of March and then into future years to deliver that level of savings. So they produce that now, and what we will be doing is monitoring the achievement. So there was a number of actions to enable us to get to that position to 130 children in external placements. It will be then on us and children's and families to deliver that, and that will realise the saving. And as Ben said, we're moving in the right direction from the work that's been undertaken to date on that. following the report. A lot of the work was in train. It's just going faster and harder on those positions. Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson, do you have a final? No. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to talk in more general terms about the budget. But first of all, thank you very much indeed to Children and Family reps who've gone into some detail today. The projected outturn this month was 39.5 million, but would have been 44 million, as Victoria pointed out, if it hadn't been for Section 278 income. I'm concerned about the sustainability of the overall council budget. This year, I think I'm right in saying that we got an additional £67 million from the government over and above the allocation, most of which has gone or will go on social care. Our general fund, strategic contingency and social care contingency reserves in total are £58 million. £39.5 million of that will have gone if things don't change before the end of the year. Just as an aside, really, the medium-term financial strategy for the next couple of years is predicated on an inflation rate of 2%. The lowest it's been in the current financial year is 3.4%, and it's currently 3.6%. So I want to come back on this in sort of due course, but I am concerned about the sustainability of the budget as it sort of stands now. So I'd like some confirmation that we will finish within budget this current year.
Thank you, Chair. It's quite difficult to hear, but what I would say is that we have received extra funding. The majority of that is through the social care grants or through the extra council tax that we've received. We do reflect in the budget that the highest cost areas are within social care, and we did put in quite a large amount of the resources into this financial year around managing that position. We did recognise that demand was a pressure and that it was difficult to forecast, hence why we set up the strategic contingency reserve and the social care reserve in when we're setting the budget for 25-26. However, demand has increased over and above that. What I would say in 26-27 is that we have recognised that the trends are very difficult to forecast. But based on the information we've got at the moment, we will be investing 76 million into social care and homelessness for next financial year to bring some of that sustainability in. However, we will be using those reserves that we'd set up for this purpose to manage this year and into general fund balances to balance the budget. But we are going to increase the contribution into those reserves for 26-27 to get us back to a more sustainable footing. And over the remaining life of the medium-term financial strategy, we will be increasing the contribution to the general fund balances to get them back up to the 50 million at the end of the strategy, as we were planning on doing before we had this overspending year. So we are doing a lot of things around ensuring that we've got sustainability in the medium term to get us more resilient as we move forward. On the inflation rate of 2% is for other inflation. However, we go through each of the different elements within the medium-term financial strategy. For example, staffing, which is our highest increase, and we've put in 3.5% for wage inflation. We've also, on the pension fund, we've obviously been in consultation with the West Yorkshire Pension Fund and negotiated the contribution rates that we will be making in those areas. For things like gas, fuel, electricity, we put in other inflationary pressures, not 2%, and any other contracts that we have in place, they're linked to whatever's in the contract, either RPI or CPI. So the 2% is general on everything else that's not covered within those specific categories of inflation. In previous years, for those areas, we haven't put in inflation, but we've recognised that inflation is increasing and therefore we have put a level in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finn, do you have a follow-up to
that? Yes, thank you very much. It's an extension of it, really. Thanks very much, Victoria. I know we're waiting for the cross-cutting sort of savings that are due to be, I think, announced, or at least a savings plan to be announced for the December Executive Board. But so far, our savings have been based on directorate incremental efficiencies and service reviews together with the core business transformation, most of which won't produce, the latter anyway, won't produce a huge amount of savings, although procurement remains to be seen. Well, not Victoria, but Mariana will know I've asked twice now about more details of the cross-cutting savings in the organisational plan, which you understand is still being written. And I just wonder if we could have some clarification on what that is likely to provide next month and for the following 3 or 4 months before the end of the financial year.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Flynn. We are running it tighter than ever this year, as you know, for various reasons, not least because we are trying to make that significant switch from directorate to cross-cutting. I can confirm the organisational plan is in development, will be ready for December's executive board. The savings proposals will cover a mixture of directorate and cross-council. In particular, the cross-council ones will be under the headings of organisational effectiveness, revenue growth, and also prevention. But we are doing a lot of work to ensure that we're not double counting, because obviously that is the risk with this. But the IBP, the initial budget proposal for December, and the organisational plan will set out in both words and numbers what those proposals are. And I think the private working group for scrutiny is the week before executive board and the week after the papers have been published. So hopefully there'll be a really good opportunity for you to build on the work you did earlier in the year, helping us with the organisational plan during that period, and in the wider consultation prior to February's executive board, and that being a final version prior to full council.
Okay, thank you. All right, I've got Councillor Martin, and I don't have any other indications.
Thank you. Yeah, just back to children's services. Given Leeds' outstanding, consistently outstanding record on delivering children's social care over the last decade, do you ever foresee us providing the high level residential care to children from other local authorities as well as children from Leeds, given that I think that we would provide, or we do provide, a much better quality service than anyone from the private sector? Thank you.
Thank you. We often, when we talk about residential, don't talk about our home at Adelbeck, which is one of the larger national resources in terms of a secure children's home. And at Adelbeck, we provide care to a number of children from other local authorities, do so very successfully, and provide them with a high quality of care and support as they carry on in that journey through Adelbeck. I think at the moment our provision is in demand for our own young people. However, were we to get to a position where we had spare capacity, there's no reason in principle why we wouldn't consider offering it to other local authorities if that became appropriate to do so. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think we'll be there for a little while, but certainly there's real benefits both for the home that offers it and for the authority that receives it, and principally for the child, in working collaboratively and trying to provide care for young people in that space. So were we to have the capacity, we would consider it. And as I say, we do so at Adelbeck and do so very effectively for young people there.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, did you have?
Briefly, it was just you, in your presentation, you said you see a role for the private sector and you don't want to over-provide. What I'm suggesting is that we aim at over-providing, because I think that whatever we do is better than the private sector. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden, you want to come in on that question?
Yes, and we do work with I work with lead members all over the Yorkshire and Humber region, and there will be times when young people would be better off away from their communities for safety reasons and things, and we do work collaboratively where we can provide, especially in Adelbeck. I have to say though that children and young people are best living in their communities, so although we provide outstanding care, their outcomes are better in their families, in their communities, going to school with people that they grew up with, so are having the support and the love and care around them of their own communities. So, but what we have been doing over the years have been outstanding is supporting other local authorities in delivering their own good and outstanding care, whether it's foster carers or in their own residential care. And we've been working with a number of local authorities because children are best in their own communities, even though I'm a Leedsophile and, we're the best city in the UK, if not the world.
Thank you. Quick question. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one added to Councillor Martin's question and Councillor Hayden's response. Do we charge a fee when we provide that advice? Or
We get paid by the government to be a partner in practice. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to draw that item to an end. Are members happy with the recommendations in the report? Would anyone like to formulate an additional recommendation? In which case members are indicating that they're happy with the recommendations. So we will move on to the next item, but before we do that, I'm going to suggest a 5-minute comfort break. So we'll be back here at 11:33 exactly. Thank you, to start the next item.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Councillor Flynn. We're starting on to the next item, which is, as I mentioned earlier, we swapped items 8 and 9 around. So over to Lewis. Thank you for the procurement strategy item.
Thanks, Chair. So assuming members have read papers, so I've done a couple of slides. The focus of these ones is on the strategy itself. I know the beginning bit does talk about some of the highlights from the previous strategy. So again, just main item being on the new procurement strategy and seeking member comments and observations. So in terms of why a new strategy is required, so the previous one ran 2019 to 2024. Since then, there's been significant changes in things such as the procurement legislation. So previously brought a paper a few months ago around the launch of the Procurement Act and the preparation that procurement and commercial services had done in conjunction with services on that. In terms of building on previous successes and lessons learned, absolutely, we think that with the new strategy and some of the building blocks does take some of the learning and some of the comments and observations we've had previously in terms of building on that. And then again, finally, aligning with the Leeds ambitions and organisational priorities. So again, could be that some of these elements do change over the next couple of months, but wanted to do some of that work in terms of alignment with Leeds ambitions. So in essence, some of the main bits of the vision for this strategy. So really we wanted to focus on delivering successful outcomes for residents, businesses and communities. Again, building on previous work within the strategy 2019-24. You'll have seen in the draft procurement strategy, really the essence of it is doing what's best for Leeds. So through each of the building blocks, really focusing on what is going to give the best outcome to residents, businesses and communities. Again, you'll have seen that it is ambitious, but it is flexible and responsive, not only to existing challenges, but future ones as well, as we anticipate future challenges procurement and commercial-wise. And then again, supports, I guess, Leeds overall in its ethos as, in terms of strong economy and compassionate city. In terms of the building blocks, so in the previous strategy, we had about 5. We have extended that through to 8, and you'll have read again some of the rationale behind that. So value for money, again, is an intrinsic part of any procurement. Governance and risk, again, that's a key element. Contract management, we've decided to give that a specific building block on its own. Previously, that was with strategic supplier management, but we've decided to split that out. And again, a lot of work has been done in terms of the framework and assurance board. Ethical, social and purposeful procurement. So again, building on the work that's been done from a social value and EDI perspective. Commercialisation, so as there's an increase for services and reduction in funding, can we be more innovative and explore alternative funding mechanisms and ways of generating income for the council? Supplier and market management, so you've seen as well, there is a focus on that and how can we in partnership with our providers deliver more successful outcomes. Reform and continuous improvement. So we have done a lot of work in terms of the implementation of the new Procurement Act. We don't just want that to be a stop in time post February 2025. We do want to continue innovating and having the best commercial function that we can. Then finally, we couldn't do this without both the procurement and commercial services team, but also our wider colleagues across the council entering into contracts and procurement activity. So again, we wanted to highlight a focus on this as well. And I guess just in summary, again, some of the changes between the two. So a greater focus on social value and responsible procurement. Again, we wanted to split out the contract management and assurance elements to make sure that we did deliver on these priorities. Again, can we be more innovative in commercial opportunities and income generation, enhance supplier engagement, and then finally, again, continuous improvement through the lifetime of this strategy. In terms of the timeline, so we've done different levels of consultation between for the past couple of months. We're here today to seek members' comments and observations in terms of the strategy itself. We do anticipate further consultation and design and review over the next couple of months with the intention of coming back with a more polished strategy prior to going to Executive Board in early 2026. Once we do that and everyone's happy with the strategy, we will anticipate rolling that out sort of early-ish 2026 as well. There were also some discussion points for members, so I'd put some questions. You probably have your own questions, but just to start the conversation. So there's one around the strategy's approach to doing what's best for Leeds. The second one was around contract management, and the last one was around sort of engagement and collaboration with communities and councils and wards in terms of the activities as well. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you. Very succinct presentation. Much appreciated. Councillor Cooper, anything you'd like to add? No? Well, this is just to emphasise, this is pre-decision scrutiny. So it's a really good chance for us to influence this strategy, which I think is at a reasonably early stage. So really grateful for this opportunity. So I have got councillors Martin, Parnham, Timmins, Hamilton, Black, pretty much everybody. I'll write those down as we go. So we'll start with Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you very much, Lewis. And right at the start, and to address your first discussion point then, so Leeds has got an approach to something called community wealth building, which I'm sure you're familiar with, and our work with fellow anchor organisations across the city has put Leeds in a significantly stronger position than other local authorities in terms of facing the current economic crisis and cost of living crisis, and that's been reflected in the national indices of multiple deprivation, and where some of our communities have really sort of fared relatively well compared to the rest of the country. Therefore, and I see our approach to procurement and contract management as playing a key part in this strength. So I just want to make sure that we use our full economic weight. We continue to use our full economic weight in shaping and supporting the local economy. So I'm going to suggest that we specifically rename the building block D as community wealth building to really emphasise how we're going to use that economic muscle of the local authority, and do things like awarding contracts that will really help the local economy in terms of paying real living wage and so on and so forth. You'll know all the detail behind that, but I'm suggesting that we really do that and put that above value for money. Of course, yes, we all want value for money, but if it's interpreted in the wrong way, what that can do is lead to a race to the bottom of the cheapest, and I'm sure that you don't mean that. Thank you. Thanks.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Martin. We definitely will review that. Just for context as well, I do sit as co-chair for the Leeds Public Sector Procurement Anchors, so we do a lot of work in the city with our health, education, utilities and so on partners as well. That is something we're really keen on, because we recognise we are some of the largest public sector buyers in the city, and we do have the opportunity to shape that economic strategy, not only to support communities but to support our local suppliers. I hope that's come through in the strategy itself as well, but we definitely will take that into consideration. So thank you for raising.
Thank you. I think we've got we have Mariana and Victoria both looking to come in there.
Just to build on that, and I think Rob's probably already got this in the forward work programme, but as you know, all the anchor institutions do fill in a progression framework about how we're all doing in relation to aspects like procurement, employment, etc., civic responsibilities, that will also, go to IIIG scrutiny, because obviously the anchor framework comes out of the inclusive growth strategy. But I have suggested to Rob that actually it would be of interest to this board, because it's how we're doing as an organisation, being an anchor ourselves, and I think that's kind of fits squarely, and we can maybe try and pick up in that one a bit more of narrative about what impact that's had in this issue, but also more broadly. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. Also, just on the value for money and efficiency, the value for money is around the efficiency, effectiveness and the economic benefits of it. And obviously when we're assessing contracts, etc., we're looking at the value of those contracts and the quality of the service or supply that we're procuring. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, anything more on that? No. Great. Okay, Councillor Parnham.
Thank you, Chair. Lewis, thanks for another excellent report and presentation. I'm fully behind the strategy. I think it's an excellent strategy. The fact that Leeds City Council buys in over £1 billion worth of services every year will be a surprise for a lot of our residents. So I'm all in favour of it. So a couple of points. We've talked about economic benefits. I'd like to see how we can change and progress social issues, if we can build that into our contracts as well. So I just wonder what mechanism we can do with that. Second question relating to that is, how can we monitor the progress going forwards? Do you have enough staff, for example? And then the final thing, on page 116, it's just a question of syntax. I'm not sure what it means. The second bullet point down, Lewis, can you see it? On 116, it just talks about higher weightings allocated for social value. When I read that bullet point, I'm just not quite clear what it means. Can you just in a nutshell explain what it means, please? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parnham. So in terms of the social value bits, so the first question around, do we consider sort of social impact in our contracts? So Victoria alluded to it a bit earlier. You know, when we're procuring contracts, it's not just around sort of race to bottom cost drivers, but we do consider a wider impact. So within our tenders, what we'll typically have is a social value question and weighting, in which we will cover things like environment, economic, local community, etc., which I've referenced in the report itself as well. So we don't just consider price. You know, we consider a different varying different techniques and methods to get the best value out of the contract. So in terms of that second point around 20% as well, so typically what we have in tenders within the council around a 10% weighting. I think I've mentioned at a previous scrutiny board, there are other core cities that have higher weightings than that. So my aspiration is to really develop that bit of our tenders to support services and support the city in terms of, can we make the weighting of social value higher within our tenders so that we can get maximum community impact or direct contribution to the Leeds ambition. So it's around the scoring matrix. Apologies, it wasn't clear, but it's more out of 100, typically we have 10%. Can we push it up to 20% to really maximise the social impact?
Thank you, Chair. I get it now. I understand now what you mean about the actual weight. Can I just ask very quickly, I understand in the procurement process you have this weight and how is it monitored at all, or do you just hope for the best?
Yeah, so within procurement and commercial services, we've got a social value team, so dedicated social value officers within the council. We've not had a chance to go into today, but we do monitor that as part of our sort of, which goes to corporate governance and audit committee. So we do measure sort of what suppliers have committed to and make sure they do deliver it. So I think last year I brought a paper around social value and the actions we were taking to close the gap between that committed and delivered, because it is an interest not only to members but to the public as well, particularly when suppliers are winning contracts with high social value. So myself and the team work really hard with suppliers, with services, with residents, not only to make sure we're getting that committed social value, but to make sure we're brokering the best types of social value across the city to really have an impact.
Thank you. Great, we'll move on to Councillor Timmins, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lewis, for your presentation. So I've got a similar comment and question to Councillor Martin, but maybe from a slightly different lens. I do like the look of the procurement strategy. The 8 building blocks are good and do represent the values and priorities of the city, but I do think we're missing something. For me, I would like a 9th building block, which would be supporting and promoting the Leeds local economy, or something to that effect. I raised this last time we discussed procurement in April. So in all our communities, you know, we've got fantastic firms who give great services, good craftspeople, make great products. And I know it's covered in social value, which it does bring, but being included as a footnote, it felt to me, in one of the other building blocks, doesn't really give it the emphasis that it deserves. And where the draft strategy of each of the building blocks says what great looks like, I'd like to know what great looks like specifically for local economy and using local businesses.
Thanks, Councillor Timmins. Definitely we'll consider that. I think partly it's covered by social value. I think in terms of building block 6, it does talk about supplier and market management again. If it doesn't come across very strongly, I will review that. I think previously in April I did talk about some of the work that had been done in terms of promoting and accessing opportunities to the local market. So myself, in conjunction with the Leeds anchors, did hold a specific SME event aimed at the facilities management and construction industry. So really getting into the supply chain and promoting some of the opportunities that all of us have. And again, I would like to build on that within the new strategy. So in there, I've mentioned activities such as the Meet the Buyer events. There's definitely a focus with myself and the team around pre-market engagement, which is one of the benefits of the new Procurement Act, is around how can we make more opportunities accessible to local businesses? How can we get to understand those markets a bit more as well? So I think it's hitting both of those building blocks. Not sure if we definitely need a 9th one, but I think can we make it stronger in the other 8, because it's still quite a lot.
Thank you. You have a follow up on that? Quick.
I just don't think you like odd numbers, maybe. Just as a follow up. What do we do when we give that big project contract? So in my ward at the moment, we've got CISC doing the Dawson's Corner project. What work do we do with them to make sure that when they're subcontracting, they are also looking at our local businesses as well?
I'll come back on that specific scheme, Councillor Timmins, just because I don't know the detail today. I've mentioned some of the activities we take more broadly around opening opportunities to the market, and I am aware in previous procurements we have done stuff around local spend, so that in terms of what Councillor Parnham was saying around do we monitor, etc., that's one of the other metrics we do throughout. So in terms of local spend, so even if we're awarding major contracts to a single supplier, are they working directly with the local economy? Because we recognise that there are opportunities to buy things local, to contract local as well. So that's one of the metrics that sits with the social value dashboard and reporting as well. But I'll come back on that specific one. Just wanted to give an overarching view on what we do around tier 1 suppliers.
That's fine, thank you. I must say I tend to agree that we should sharpen rather than add more building blocks in that case. But and I'm sure there'll be more on contract management in this conversation. So I've got Councillor Hamilton coming up next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lois, for your presentation. I am simple, and I've got simple questions, not as complicated as my colleague here. So mine is, what mechanism will ensure diverse suppliers are included, the minority owners and local SMEs? What's in place for them to access opportunities? And just, I think, 2 more. This main one. What's the plan to ensure small, local and third sector organisations are not crowded out by large national suppliers? And I did have one more. How will the council deal with underperforming contracts more quickly and decisively?
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. So the first question around sort of offers to minority businesses, again, maybe needs to come through stronger in building block 6 around sort of supplier and market management. We are doing some work as a procurement and commercial services team to understand some of the minority sort of groups and how we can work closer together. And it's something I've done in previous roles as well. So that is something we've been doing, identifying some of those local minority groups and organisations so that we can work closer together. So I guess building on some of the work I mentioned that was done in March as well. The second point around ensuring local SME VCSE sector is not crowded out, I think that does lend again to some of the partially to some of the stuff that comes from the Procurement Act. So one of the main outcomes of that is for us to try and reduce barriers to entry for all types of businesses, but specifically for SMEs and VCSE organisations. So we've done a lot of work internally around reviewing our documentation, trying to make it so it's easy to understand, really promoting opportunities as well. More broadly, and again linkages with our anchor colleagues. Just want to mention that around, we've been doing a lot of work around pipeline activities and opportunities, so making it so there's a single interface for suppliers to find all types of opportunities. And again, just mindful that there will be businesses across the city that don't want to contract with Leeds, for example, might want to contract with their health partners or education as well, but it's around sort of diversifying and building that knowledge for all. And the final point around the council dealing with underperforming contracts and quickening time. So we did launch the contract management framework back in August 2024. That was a real turning point for the council in terms of having that robust framework in terms of contract management, in terms of contract managers, in terms of what to do, etc. That acts as sort of the central tool for colleagues across the council. And we do, and since that time we have reported corporately through to Financial Challenge and the Contract Management Assurance Board about what's happening. So what, roughly around 800 contracts across the council, and for the first time we're able to quite clearly see how contracts are performing. What that's meant is myself and the team can work directly with services, so we're hearing about the problem earlier than we would without that corporate oversight, so we can go in and support colleagues who are doing contract management mostly, and for the majority across on top of the day jobs as well. So there is that corporate support, and we have been involved in challenging performance. The second point just on that as well is under the Procurement Act, for certain contracts above certain thresholds, we will have to report on contract underperformance and where things are going wrong. I think that's a good point for the council in some ways, in terms of suppliers won't want us to notify the market where things are not going wrong. So I would anticipate performance rising, particularly where it is a reportable contract in that way.
I have Councillors Blackburn, Hartbrook, Flynn and Hinchcliffe on my list. So Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. I've got to say I probably would have said most of what's been said previously. I think we all agree with that. I think basically, really, what we're talking about is keeping as much as the Leeds pound within Leeds and having it spent in Leeds rather than as being spent in another part of the country. So as I said, I just support what my fellow councillors have said previously, and you know, let's make sure that we keep as much of the money in Leeds.
Thank you. You may or may not want to come back on that, but just to say, I mean, there's a sort of clear interest, I think, from at least some members in that topic. So yeah, we'll come back to that. But yeah, Councillor Keeping, you want to come?
Yeah, if I could just add to Lewis's responses to those questions there. We do have a keep it local policy. So not only does it help the local economy and the economy within our communities, but actually it addresses some of the other major issues that we face as a council, like climate, the climate emergency, inclusive growth and other aspects of that as well. So can I suggest that we bring you some detail of that when we next bring procurement back? And I also think that that we've previously brought questions around the social value side of contracting. We've previously bought a report, quite a detailed report around social value, so maybe we'll bring an update around that as well, because that is, you know, some brilliant work goes on in all our communities around social value element to the contracts that the council awards. So it'd be really good to bring that detail back to Scrutiny Board at some point as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, that is helpful. Lewis, you want to come?
Yeah, it was just a point around, we do report to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee around local and SME supplier spend. So in 24-25, we did have that at 69.9% of our spend. So there was a slight dip a couple of years ago, and there was sort of concentrated efforts to try and do things to increase that spend. So again, I'm happy to link back to that report, but there has been work to try and increase that, and I think absolutely that's the intention of the strategy as well.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Hartbrook.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, very good report. And I'm glad we're keeping it, hopefully, to the number of pillars that we've already got. I was at. It's good to hear about. I mean, I think there's a lot of discussion around the room around including SMEs, and I was actually at a conference a couple of weeks ago for the Government Commercial Service, in York, reaching out to SMEs, and there's a few really good learnings that sort of came out in that a lot of SMEs don't know how to engage with the public sector. So I think any work that we can do there to break down barriers, either for them to engage with the authority, engage with the council kind of directly, or engage with prime suppliers as secondary suppliers, is a really, really good piece of work. One of the feedback that we got in this session was that a lot of SMEs are worried that if they attempt to go for a contract and are unsuccessful and give feedback, it counts against them. And actually the feedback was, no, actually it's probably quite the opposite, because it shows that you care. One of the bits that I've got a question on is the doing what's best for Leeds. And I think sometimes we're a bit nervous around talking about value for money, because people talk, it's a race to the bottom. Value for money isn't just about the cash. It's about delivering exactly what it says, a value for money. And actually social value, localism, environment, are all values. It's not just about the pound. However, we are spending our citizens' money, so we do need to keep a very kind of close eye on it. I'd like a bit more, and I know it's dotted around in the report, on the doing what's best for Leeds. I think sometimes there's a perception that doing what's best for Leeds, sometimes within the council, is doing what's best for the council, i.e. keeping the money in-house. And there's a tension there between spending money on our own services. But, sometimes we see examples as councillors where a service that the council could provide is provided because the council can provide it, when actually we know that there are often kind of quite good local suppliers who could undercut the council, sometimes by quite considerable amounts. And it's how you, I guess, measure that, capture that, and make those decisions. Because I think we'd all like to use our own resources where we can, but there has to be a threshold where you say, actually, the gap is too big. And I think I'd like to understand how we measure that and control that. And I'd also like to understand what is planned into, because some of these, there's a lot of detail in here, and a lot of the factors that go into a procurement and making decisions kind of are quite complex and varied. So I'd like to understand just a little bit briefly on how much the weightings of these flex between different procurements and different opportunities. And I'll shut up now and let you answer.
Just thank you, Councillor Hartbrook. In terms of, I guess, the doing what's best for Leeds, just to pick up on that point, I think in essence it's context driven, isn't it? So no single procurement is the same, and we won't be able to apply specific mandated weightings all of the time. So different procurement decisions will dictate different approaches to things. So you might have noticed in some of the forwards, and we've kind of lent into that in the sense that, at lower value procurements, that might mean doing things in a particular way. At higher value procurements, it might mean we are more risk averse because we have to comply specifically with the Procurement Act and some of the challenges that are associated with those bits as well. So in terms of the weightings flexing, they do flex, and it's context and situational as well. So there might be markets where we can get a lot more social value because it's embedded into that specific market, but there may be some markets where that's not as easy to do, and through the procurement activity and through the market development activities we're doing, not only as a city but across the region and with our partners at a core cities level, we are trying to break into those markets and deliver more things, for example, such as social value. I think Victoria's going to come in around the internal service provider bit.
So just on the internal service provider, we are doing a review of our internal services to make sure that they're delivering value for money, and we're looking at performance and productivity. But we have to remember that they also perform a welfare benefit as well as part of delivering those services. But once we've made the decision to have in-house services, then it is key that we use those in-house services. The reason being is that if we don't, we're paying twice. So we've got the staffing costs, etc., of delivering those services. those staff need to be fully occupied, and if we do go external when we've got that provision in-house, it costs us twice because we're paying for those staff and then we're paying the external contractor. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yep, Lewis.
Yeah. There's just another point around sort of our contract procedure rules. So there's a big review that was done earlier in the year in conjunction with the implementation of the Procurement Act, and again there's been a lot of work to make them as flexible as possible, so to do what's best for Leeds in terms of what decision is going to bring not the best outcome for the council but the best outcome for the city. So, and the feedback we've had over the past year is that it does allow for some of those flexibilities. Where we can be flexible, we absolutely will, combined with sort of more detailed undertaking and development with those markets. You know, I'm definitely picking up on the comments today. Can we do more with local suppliers? Can we do more with SMEs? I think we have done a lot over the past 5 years, but that's not to say that we can't do more, and we're definitely committed as a team to that.
Mariana, you have a brief
Just
addition?
really quickly, it's also looking to other anchor institutions. I know Leeds Beckett University, for example, the business school, do a lot to support SMEs and, you know, kind of a wide range of SMEs. So it's kind of using them as support as well, not everything needing to be done by the council ourselves.
Thank you. So I've got a short follow-up question from Councillor Hartbrook, and then I've got Flynn, Hinchcliffe and myself to come in.
Thanks, Chair. More a comment than a question, but it'd be really good to sort of see some regular reporting in terms of things like amount of money spent with SMEs in the community and blah, 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 etc. Because I think that does engage people and also acts as a promotion, because if people see that, if businesses see that as a council we're spending more in our communities, it encourages them to engage because they see it's not lip service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. Two items, Lewis, and one's on the IT system, which is in the process, I think, of being embedded. There were some worries about the transfer of data being one of the major risks, I think, which might have affected your relationship with suppliers and contractors, etc. Be grateful if you could bring us up to date with that one. And secondly, on economies of scale, linked to what a couple of the other councillors have talked about, I know you work in partnership with with Wyker basically, and Yorkshire and Humber, and possibly more widely than that. I wondered if you were getting any pushback, sort of cultural pushback from those other partners, and how important will it be to, you know, how your future strategy sort of develops?
Thanks, Councillor Flynn. So more broadly around the implementation of the new procurement and contract management system. So we awarded the contract a few months ago, and there's been a significant undertaking in conjunction with our awarded supplier Jagger internally to get the system ready. So that's meant a lot of work around sort of UAT testing, engaging with colleagues across the council, engaging with suppliers and getting them onto the new system, getting our existing contracts and migrating those over. So the majority of that work has been done, and the system is in essence live. We've got a couple of teething problems we're working through, which should be resolved, I think, at the end of this week, and then it will be more publicly accessible to all suppliers. We have done, again, recognising that you know, this will be a big change for suppliers. We have done extensive supplier engagement, and all of our suppliers, my understanding is all of the suppliers we work with now are on the new system as well. So just in terms of that bit, there's been a lot of work and we are pretty much there. In terms of the second point, Councillor Flynn, on economies of scale and pushback, I think at the last Scrutiny board I would have mentioned a piece of work that I was doing in conjunction with Crown Commercial Services, which is the central government's commercial body, around reviewing spend and contracting activity, not only across Leeds but around the Yorkshire and Humber, our partners, our council partners as well. So in terms of some of the recommendations that came from that, there were things around looking at sort of the corporate spend category. You know, can we do things as a collective to reduce operating costs and reduce spend? And I know you'll know, Councillor Flynn, from conversations we've had, do a lot of work with sort of West Yorkshire heads of service as well to look at how we can better integrate and better use our economies of scale. That is still work in progress, I would say, and the priority sort of this year has been implementation of the Procurement Act, new system, etc. But that is on the forward plan of actions for us as heads across the region.
and I'll speak more about it on Thursday, Lewis. Okay, see you then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hinchcliffe next, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Lewis, for this important work. I'm interested in the social value aspect, and the meaning of the term would mean different things to different communities, different members. So I'd be grateful if you could say a little bit more about how you plan to engage communities on what they need, how you plan to engage ward members, and how to kind of embed the wish list per se into the information for bidders when it comes to social value going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Hinchcliffe. So you might be aware I took a paper to Communities Chair a few weeks ago, which I guess in essence outlined. We've done a lot of work over the past 5-6 years around social value, but I think one thing that definitely has come through over the past couple of years is more of that engagement with communities and finding appropriate mechanisms to do so. So in that paper I outlined sort of a plan of action around can we use committee chairs forums and the committee structure to really engage locally, so that we're meeting sort of local residents, the wish lists and sort of what is actually happening, because sometimes I think that can get lost in social value. I guess what I'd also say more broadly around that definition, I think we could spend a lot of time collectively as a city kind of going round and round around what the right definition is. I think where we got to as a city through some of the roundtable work that was done last year was around similar to doing what's best for Leeds, but in essence what we could all agree on regardless of sector, organisation, size, was we all want to do maximise their impact for Leeds. You know, when it comes down to what we're all trying to do through social value activities, it's trying to maximise that impact. So I think we could all agree at the time on what that, regardless of whether you're in health, education, private sector, VCSE, etc. And that was a sort of phrase that was adopted through the roundtable work. So we were all really clear on why we're doing this activity and what it means. So again, I think the intention is around community committees is to come back again in a couple of months' time. I'm doing work with the localities team more specifically around developing that wish list. So we've got something for bidders. And you may be aware that recently we launched our first ever social value pages on the council website to really explain to not only bidders but businesses. I think businesses across the city come to the council web pages as a source of information. I think I mentioned earlier I said earlier that there's businesses across the city that don't want to contract with the council because their services aren't something that we would require necessarily, but again they come to our web pages. So can we maximise the impact? So again, some of that social value brokerage and interaction is happening independent of the council as well.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick ones from me. I think from today's conversation, there's an interest in like sharpening our understanding of what social value looks like and some of the numbers and what we're weighting. So I am going to suggest an additional recommendation that we see this strategy again before it goes to exec board, even just for us to take a look at or comment on. So I will seek member approval for that in a moment. I would like to see addressed what we think the risks are as well of additional weighting on social value. I'd like to know how those social value items on a contract are generated. You use the phrase wish list earlier, and I suspect what we don't do actually is generate like wish lists. I imagine that they're quite sort of hard-headed. This is what we really need as a community. So just reassurance about that, and like, is there a risk that certain suppliers might be able to game some of those items a bit more than they could around just simply the cost of a contract or delivery timelines, and so on. And then no need to particularly say a lot about that now, but I would really like to see that addressed if possible when we come back to the board. And then just around contract management, in the strategy we have some statements around what we want contract management to look like, but what I don't really know is how that's a change from what we currently do. Have there been sort of failures that we're learning from? I think in terms of public confidence in what we do as a council, contract management doesn't sound very exciting, but actually it's one of the absolutely key things. It's one of the things that people see and they want reassurance that we are like good customers in that sense, and that we stand up for what we expect. So what changes do you anticipate practically around how we do contract management with this new strategy?
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. So in terms of the first point around addressing social value, I mean, from my perspective, I'm happy to come and give a specific item on social value. I have done that in the past, and I'm fine. I don't want to dilute the sort of intention of this paper with that. Again, I'm happy to do a specific paper and come back to scrutiny members on social value. Happy to do it. I'm really proud of the work we've done as a council and as a city around that, but there are still further ways to go. In terms of contract management, I would say, so a few years ago there was a peer review done by LGA, and sort of that indicated, amongst other things, you know, that contract management was particularly weak in some areas across the council. There were definite pockets of really good contract management, but what it did say is that we could improve. I think I sort of came into post October 2023, and in recognising some of those bits, we did start to do the work on developing the contract management framework. So, and as I've mentioned previously, you know, for the first time across the council, we've got corporate oversight of what's happening to a certain degree across contracts. We've done a lot of work with training and upskilling contract managers, because we do recognise that most of them are doing it on top of their day jobs as well. So how can we make it proportionate? How can we make it relevant? You know, in an ideal world, we'd all spend hundreds of hours on a specific contract, but we don't always have the luxury. That's why we've brought in the corporate contract management team as well to support services in being able to challenge. You know, for me and the team, it's easier to do that because we sit independent from the contract and from council services as well. We do a lot of work with our partners, local partnerships. We've done a lot of work with them over the past couple of years as well. So in terms of the changes, what I would anticipate in 2031 through the work we're doing is that there is stronger contract management, that contract managers feel more confident in challenging issues we've had around things like document retention, knowing the contracts, etc. That came through in some of the work we've done over the past couple of years, and we're trying to strengthen that through the new contract management and procurement system as well. So having dedicated spaces with dedicated things like reminders and alerts to contract managers, even things like that. It sounds quite simple, but knowing what the contract says hopefully will support the council in achieving value for money.
Thank you. Did you have something to add there, Councillor Cooper? Yeah. Yes, I think we're going to draw this item to a close. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And just to say thank you to all Scrutiny Board members for the comments today on the procurement paper. We always will reflect the views of Scrutiny Board in the final report that goes to Executive Board anyway. It's hugely important to me to work with Scrutiny Board members at pre-decision level as well, as you know, sometimes we have to come post-decision on some items, but it's really important that we can do as much work as we can pre-decision, so we take the views of Scrutiny Board members with us as we make those decisions at Executive Board. So thank you to all members again for that, and thanks Lewis and the team for the excellent work that they're doing for us on our behalf.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper, and yes, I echo your thanks to the team. Much appreciated. Can I check first four members are happy with the recommendations already contained in the report? And are you happy to add on there a recommendation around bringing the procurement strategy back before it goes to Exec Board, perhaps with a particular focus on social value? And I would also like to see more around contract management and how we've learned from those, like you say, successes and failures to inform how we're going to do that and increase public confidence on that. So are members happy with that as well? Okay, lovely. Thank you. So we'll move on to our final substantive item then. We'll move straight into it, which is the workforce equality, diversity and inclusion, race equality and early resolution approach item, which was item 8 on the agenda. Oh yeah, brilliant. And I've already got an indicator for a question after the presentation. So I think I'm handing over to John and Andy for a presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've been told I've got 5 minutes and to be fairly succinct, so I'll try to do so. Papers be shared obviously prior. I've just got a very quick presentation to take you through some of the key elements to enable a conversation. Always pleased to come back to Scrutiny. You've held a really important view on workforce, and we come fairly regularly, and we'll be back again in February to take you through the annual review. So the paper is trying to bring forward work we're doing around an early resolution approach. And that's important because from the grievance practice review that we brought to Scrutiny some time ago, there were elements that we want to follow through on around what we should do next. One thing which was clear from listening to 115 plus stakeholders was we can do better around getting in early where there are issues and conflicts in the organization. And the reasons are very, very clear, because we can get to a resolution quicker, we can reduce the triage of conflicts into longer formal processes, impacts on sickness absence from work, and actually improves our broad workplace culture. Next slide, please. So talk you through actually what is it and how will it work. So the focus here is about bringing together key people in the organization with expertise around conflict management, so we can focus our attention on key themes that we identify across the organization, so we can get in early on issues. The idea is for the team to provide appropriate support and advice and steer them, so we can move quicker to get to a point of resolution. This will help managers formulate a plan, so they can work quickly to a plan that's been advised by, if you like, a group of experts, multidisciplinary. A bit like you get in the hospital when you're not a bit unwell, and you get different views from different kind of experts, and a bit of a focused treatment plan, if you like, brought forward. That's the idea of what we're trying to do here. It's within a time scale with a process of the team then going back and checking in on what's been achieved within the agreed period. Next slide, please. So who are the team then? So these are the people who will be looking at the key themes across the organization. So we have a Be Your Best Management Consortium group of people. We know we have managers who do this well. So why don't we kind of capitalize on that energy and expertise? So there'll be somebody from the BYB management team. Colleagues in HR who work in this area will be also part of the conversation. We have colleagues in children's services who work in restorative practice, who are good at managing relationships and unpicking challenges and bringing back together a way forward. And then we have a Freedom to Speak Up Guardian. As you know, we've reported on that severally to Scrutiny. So the FTSUG, or Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, is independent. So they're one step removed, but I think they do get a real broad overview of what's happening on key themes across organizations. So that's the group. Next slide, please. So a quick counter through the approach then. So we have lots of data. We're rich in data around what we're hearing from our staff. You heard from colleagues, I think, at the last board about the staff survey results and the work we're doing on that and all the action planning around that. That's a rich source of data on key themes. The FTSUG I've mentioned, she hears directly from colleagues on key themes. We have HR casework. Local intelligence is really important. Trade union colleagues pick stuff up all the time in our staff networks. So from that, we prioritize then what is the key theme and which service area. Once we've done that, we kind of meet with the service and agree and confirm that this is what we're going to do. The team then go away and do a bit of a rapid review on the key theme. What is the issue? What is the core of the problem here? How do you bring it forward really quickly for resolution? The work with the service to develop a kind of signposting action plan to take forward. Next slide, please. So the team that had this sort of advice sort of plan, the responsibility for delivering that sits with the head of service. We're very clear on accountability. This is not a team coming in and doing the work for a service. If you're going to embed solutions, it's got to be owned at service level. So they do that. They come back after the end of the period that's been agreed and do a review to make sure we've actually made a difference at the end of the quarter. And how do we use that learning to improve corporately then elsewhere? So that's the idea. Clearly, we want to reduce the number of grievances coming forward. But when we do this, actually, we may get more people coming forward because of the impact, because people feeling more, I suppose, comfortable coming forward with issues. So that may be the outcome. So this is a value-adding approach. We typically do a bit of a corporate overview where we go wide across the organization. What this is doing is intentional, specific, theme-based, clear focus on an area. We're targeting the right resource to a prioritized need in the right area. It is high support, high challenge, So whilst we're supporting the services to deliver better, we're also asking them to demonstrate what the impact will be once we've done that. And it's about dealing with what matters most sooner and earlier. Next slide, please. So in terms of timeline and where we've got to so far, we've taken this idea to our corporate leadership team, and they are in support of it. We spoke to colleagues, trade unions, and had their comments and overview, and they're supporting of it. Staff networks represent the voice of staff. I've also seen this and are happy with the approach so far. We're coming to you now, have the conversation, make sure we get your important view into the process, as we always do. So that's what we're working up. The next step then is to do a bit of data analysis, as I mentioned in the approach, to identify the area. I think we know where we can take this already, so we have a really good idea. Convene the team, do a workshop, make sure everybody's clear on what we're trying to do here and the individual roles within that, and then do a pathfinder pilot in a specific area, so we can evaluate in the new year before we go full implementation. I think we're nearly there. Next slide, please. This is what we're trying to do, very, very simple. So we'll be able to tell from baseline information around our grievance data, how outcomes we're achieving through this. We speak to services and colleagues all the time through trade unions and staff survey results and staff networks. We get a really good indication of what the lived experience feels like alongside the data that we're working through. I think there's one more slide. I'm nearly there. Yes, so I also want to touch very quickly on race equality at the request of members to touch on this quickly. Normally we come to you in February and do a full update, and we'll continue to do that. But I thought it useful to talk you through this fairly quickly on the work we're doing on race at the moment. So we've refreshed the EDI plan that went to Executive Board late autumn, and we've said very clearly that an inclusive workplace, anti-discrimination, representation are three focuses. They all speak very clearly to race equality in the organisation, and the plan sets out how we're doing that across the board for all key stakeholders in the organisation. And we're very, very, very clear where race plays a role within that, as well as all the other protected characteristics we're working on. And each tier of the organisation is clear on what we mean by those three objectives and how we're getting there. Very, very quickly, the final slide, Rob, then please. This slide really kind of talks through, particularly on race, how we're being fairly deterministic around some of the issues we're working through. So the workforce race equality standard, which is aimed at social care primarily, is one which is kind of supported by a national infrastructure that we're running the organisation at the moment. The key themes coming out of that speak broadly across the piece to the rest of the organisation, actually. So we're joining up the learning from the workforce race equality standards into broadly the EDI plan, so they are linked together. This is a focus on race specifically, but clearly the EDI plan and strategy for the organisation is cross-referencing all our protected characteristics. So I won't go into too much detail, except on the right-hand side are the key themes we're working through already around recruitment and selection, staff training, career progression, staff retention, disciplinaries and grievances. I've counted through that really quickly, but thank you.
That's great, thank you. A really good presentation. I've already got an indicator from Councillor Hamilton, myself and Councillor Flynn. Does anyone else want to raise their hand at this point? Hartbrook and Timmins. Okay, Councillor Hamilton, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just say thank you for your presentation, John. And I've read this workforce equality, etc. And great start. It's a good report, I must say. However, we've still got a long way to go. Lots more still needs to do. And, you know, I'm on your backs and I'm not going to give up. But I also, apart from it being a really good, really, really excellent going forward, and I hope to God each and every single thing, the outcome at the end of the day, it's not just on paper, but work practically from the bottom down or top up or bottom up, you know, because a lot of these things are on paper and they never really filter down. So my question I think it's on page 8, page 83, the EDI target 27, ethics diversity at senior level by 2030. What specific recruitment strategy will be implemented? You know, for example, will there be outreach to underrepresented communities, partners with diverse professional networks, you know? And then the other bit on that section, that how will the strategy be monitored for effectiveness and adjustment if annual progress plus 1.5% falls? How are we going to do that? That's just 2 questions there, and I got a couple more.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. And my senior colleagues in the room, they can chip in as well. As you know, we are working with you on some of this. I'm particularly pleased that we're doing that. You're bringing a refresh challenge to us, and we welcome that. And so it should be. That's your role as a elected member. On progression and retention, as we speak, my team are literally upstairs, taking 36 people through an inclusive leadership assessment center. So we ran this program last year for the first time. The organization took 16 people through to try and change and reflect the leadership of this organization in terms of what we look like as a city. The Deputy Chief Exec is the sponsor of the program, and she continues to do so with last year's cohort. The program is aimed at underrepresented people in the organization. We do it by data, so we're fairly targeted. So it is not positive discrimination. It is actually a positive action program. So we look at the data in terms of direct rates, what we look like, that's been declared, and then we look at where the gaps are, and we invite colleagues to then apply for this program. It is significant. It takes up a lot of the resources of my team. We're a very, very small team of 4.5, and we're running the program for a 14,000 people organization. So it's 12 months. They get interviews, they get assessment center, and they submitted a video and a statement to get to all those 3 stages. They will get a 360 feedback review from across people who lead them, who they lead. That forms a really composite view of that individual. They then start the 12-month program. We bring in leaders from outside the organization. So the local NHS Chief Exec, Rob Webster from the ICB has attended. We bring people from voluntary sector, and they get a sense of what does it feel like to be a leader. And they get all of that once a month over 12 months. They get master classes on leadership, so the functional part of being a leader, how do you manage people properly, emotional intelligence, all that kind of stuff. They work on a corporate project underpinned by one of our 4 pillars of our Leeds ambition. So, for example, there'll be a project around health and well-being, there'll be a project around growth, around resilience, around thriving. So it is linked to the strategy of the organization. This is not a standalone sort of, on the side program. It's fairly rich. And at the end, there's a graduation, which last year Councillor Lewis came to present to them, so we acknowledge their growth over the 12 months period. I can tell you a whole lot more when you have more time. I realize I'm taking a lot of time, but that is dedicated to bringing through into JNC level underrepresented groups in the organization.
Thank you, John, for that. You've answered quite a few of the questions that we're going to ask. So there's just one I'll ask and miss out the others. How is the quarterly monitoring data for the work race equality standards used to inform decision making and policy changes?
So the rest is reported 2 ways. We report it internally. There's a steering group on res of senior officers in social care, including the deputy director and head of OD, that's organization development. So they report that through. But also, much more importantly, we report it through externally, right? Because the res is backed up by social care. There's a national infrastructure that we report into, so we can compare with other local authorities. We can monitor what we look like in terms of the work we're doing. So there's an internal monitor, there's an external monitor. On the internal, on the workforce side as well, actually, our governance arrangements are quite clear. So the stats that we're aiming for at the back of the plan will go through. We have directorate EDI boards, often chaired by a senior officer for that directorate. Every directorate has a plan on a page. So they meet quarterly. Ed, the chief exec, has asked that we bring this to CLT twice a year. Scrutiny board will get to see that every year, as we often do. So we bring all of that to you so you can see where we're at. Plus you get to hear the lived experience. So that's sort of qualitative versus quantitative data. Your point about, is good on paper. What does it feel like to be a member of staff in Leeds City Council? And you get that at the annual report in February when you get to hear from all the chairs of the staff networks.
Just to say thank you for that, John, and the rest of the questions that we're going to ask that you've tipped into, I'm going to rephrase them and email you.
Thank you. Councillor Cooper, I think you wanted to just come on that.
Yes, Chair, if you would just indulge me to help to respond to some of Councillor Hamilton's questions. And I firstly want to thank Councillor Hamilton for her work that she does on race equality for us as elected members as well. And she's absolutely right that, we've come a long way, that we've got a lot right, but we've still got work to do. And we recognise that as an organisation. We are not complacent in the position that we're in. We do know that we need to make more strides within that. And hopefully, by the time we get to February, we'll be able to show the positive work that's been done in relation to getting us to that position as well, Chair. But I really just wanted to give my thanks to Councillor Hamilton for the work that she does on this agenda.
Thank you, and I'm sure the whole board can echo those thanks as well. I will come in now with a question myself. I'm just trying to untangle in my head how this relates to the staff survey action plans, just a couple of thoughts. One, there obviously, I think every single team or service is going to be doing an action plan. Is that a chance to scale what you find? Because I think sort of around January time, you're sort of starting this. How are you going to feed into those action plans? So even while the pilot is ongoing, potentially you can enhance that work. And for whichever service you end up doing this pilot with, how will it work? How will those two things work together? Will there be duplication? How will it add value? Is that something you thought about? I would really appreciate your thoughts on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll cover this question. You're right, they do link very strongly between this piece of work John's described and the staff survey. So as colleagues know, we've now developed 38 different staff survey action plans by the key services across the organisation. The corporate leadership team will have a first go tomorrow to have a look at the detail of that. And the content of that will be really important to help us to identify which services that we will then apply the early dispute resolution process John's described. So they have to link, and we'll do that piece of work based on the content of that action plan. As part of the staff survey action planning activity, we're committed to going back to reviewing the delivery against those action plans, again, just so we keep the momentum and we're keeping working through. So what we will do is we'll use the action plans for the staff survey to identify where we go with the early resolution, as John said, so that will provide that rich data, that dashboard of data. Then we'll identify where best to pilot. Obviously, then we'll go out and actually implement. And then when we do the staff survey reviewing, we'll be able to judge whether or not that's had an impact or not. So certainly the corporate leadership team will then have a look at assessing whether or not we made progress accordingly. So we'll avoid the double doing and just make sure that both pieces of work obviously dovetail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Chair. First question was posed already by Councillor Hamilton, so on under-representation, so happy with that one. I note that there was a great deal of trade union and staff network involvement in the setting up of this and all the rest of it. A little bit disappointed, nothing to do with HR, that they're not here today, that we could have had their sort of reaction to it. Basically, because quite often, and indeed whenever the staff networks are here, their interpretation is rather different from ours is, and maybe senior management is as well. So it's always good to see it from the bottom up, as Councillor Hamilton said before. Note that the EDI and staff survey outcome is on the agenda again in February, and I do hope at that stage we'll have some representation from staffing networks and the trade unions at that stage. Comment rather than a question. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. No, you're absolutely right. I think certainly the staff networks, managers, our trade unions are comfortable conceptually with the model we've set out. I think you're absolutely right that probably all members have said it all depends on the delivery, what happens when we actually do it. And certainly come February, assuming this board are comfortable, we do intend to invite our staff network colleagues to attend. And I'm sure they will be very open and very frank as to whether the methodology we described has worked in practice. So I'm sure they'll tell us. Obviously, still fairly early days because we probably would have only been around the cycle quite quickly. But nevertheless, I'm sure you'll hear directly from them as to whether it's really made any difference out there. But I completely agree with you, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. I guess in terms of the timing of your pilot, like you say, we're having a February meeting, which is very much relevant, but the full results of the pilot might not be available then. But it would definitely be good to get kind of an incremental update on it in February as well. I've got Councillor Hartbrook up next.
Thank you, Chair. First, just an observation and then a short question following on from it. I felt, look, in our country, in our city, that EDI is probably more important now than at any point it's ever been. You know, I have my wife's Sri Lankan, so I have a mixed race marriage. My kids are mixed race, and for most of the nearly 30 years that we've been married, race never felt like an issue both in my community and in my relationship. But speaking to my own wife, she's feeling something shifted in our society for the worse. You know, we feel further away from Martin Luther King's dream of, you know, judging people by their character, not by the colour of the skin than ever before. So I think it's important as a city that whenever we get the opportunity, both as corporate parents, as councillors, and in the society in which we operate, that we advocate and speak strongly and clearly in support of EDI, because I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I must admit that I dared to think at one point it would be a topic that would be consigned to history at some point, and it swung back around and hit us in the backside in a way that, you know, a lot of it's been imported from rhetoric that's come over from America, and you're seeing getting played in our own towns and cities and country now. So the question I'm coming around to is, in that, I think it's great that we're doing some really good stuff as a city. I just wondered how your work had been impacted by what feels like a broader cultural drift backwards in terms of delivering that, and whether there's any observations or comments or that you had on that topic.
Thank you, Councillor Hartbrook. You make really important points. I make no apology, Scrutiny, for the work we've done in this organisation on EDI. We have been deliberate, focused over the last 5 years. We didn't start it 5 years ago. We've always done this. But there's been a need to push further over the last few years. And that's why this is one side of EDI. We also do really good EDI work externally with communities around our cohesion piece with colleagues who sit in communities, housing and environment. And we work really jointly together. We talk all the time. Because actually we all know clearly our colleagues come from our communities, don't they? They don't live in a vacuum. They come from home and they bring that stuff here, and we work through with them how they're feeling. So you're absolutely spot on. The strategy for the organization, if you go to our website, you will see an overarching strategy. And it is, equality, diversity and inclusion as one piece. And then you get the legs of the stool, as it were. So you get the workforce bit that I'm leading on. You get our communities external bit that Jeff and others are working on. And then there's a third piece, which is service delivery to our communities and residents. And those three are aligned. They walk the same path. So that's how we join it up. But yes, I think the kind of tone of things over the last few years hasn't been helpful. And I would agree with you that this is the time to really demonstrate why what we're doing is important. And not shy away from the work we're doing, because it does make a difference. It matters to our residents, who that's why we're here. It certainly matters to our workforce. If we get the people bit right, all the stuff you heard about today about finance and procurement, of course I'm biased, I will say that, won't I? They follow. If you don't get the people bit right, you can't do the other side. It's people firstly, and then the other stuff. So I can speak for ages on this. So I agree with you that, we need to be joined up internally, externally. We need to be clear on our approach, and I think we are. And to be brave and to ask for this check-in with you all the time to say, are we getting this right? Are we missing a trick here? What are you picking up from your constituencies? And what are people saying to you that we haven't picked up to make sure we don't miss anything?
Thank you. Any follow-up on that? I've got Councillor Hamilton just indicated a comment on that, and then we've got Councillor Timmins.
No, it's just to say that, John, you spoke very passionately to answer Councillor Artbrook question and comment, and you're coming from the same place I'm coming from, which is deep within, and I do understand where your wife's coming from. And like I said, Mountain saying that you've been listening to our conversation as a community, black community, how we're feeling at this moment in time. And it is, we don't want to go back to the 70s and 80s, because I lived it. And, so, yeah, just leave it there. And just to say that also, I must say, thanks to the CEO and the leader for the statement. I did request a statement to go out. Lots of people have seen it, and they're pleased with it. However, we have a long way to go, and none of us are here accepting the rhetoric that's out there. But to say, thank you, John, and I'm still pressuring you.
Thank you. What was the phrase earlier? High challenge, high support. Councillor Timmins.
Thanks, Chair. My comment or question is actually quite irrelevant just after the contributions that we've just had. I really appreciated Councillor Hartbrook's contribution. I'm married to someone from a different culture, from a different country, and she's white. She doesn't feel it as much, but she does feel it. And the tone of the unwelcome tone that's coming across, and she sees it from people in my own family as well, not immediate family, and the way it makes people feel is just not acceptable. And it's good to see support across the board from people in this room and across the council. And yeah, John, absolutely right. Never ever make any apology for the work we do on EDI. It's so important, and the way you spoke about that was really powerful, so thank you.
I get from that you've decided, yeah, that's fine. Does anyone else have a contribution question they would like to make on this item? Well, in that case, so we have the recommendations in the report. Is everybody happy with those? And then I think there's just a very clear interest in the trial reporting back to the board we'll have that conversation in a way in February, but once there is an outcome or data available that we can analyse and talk about, if that could come back to the board as well, please. So are we happy with that as an additional recommendation? Okay, looks like we are. In that case, thank you ever so much, everybody, for your time. We have one final item, which is the work programme, which we'll move on to now.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, just briefly on the board's work programme, obviously noting a few comments from the meeting and the recommendations that the Chair just spoke about. So the EDI item, the annual item to include clearly the staff networks and their involvement in it. Also on procurement, a request that comes back to the board, pre-decision again in advance of exec board. And then there was some discussion in the pre-meet around working groups, particularly on the staff survey item. So I will go in with you, Chair, develop a bit of a plan on that. And I think, other than to note that the work programme's there for members to comment on at every meeting, and please do should you wish to. And the exec board minutes are also there at Appendix 2 for any further comments. But that's it, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, any questions on that from anybody? In that case, we'll bring this meeting to a close. Do we share date and time of the next meeting? It's in your diaries, but the next meeting will be 26th of January with a start time of 10:30. Thank you very much.